Hello and welcome to this HFS Videocast with me, David Cushman, and very special guests, Terry Walby from Blue Prism and Fersht from HFS. We're going to talk today about some research work we've been doing with Blue Prism. In partnership with Blue Prism, we've surveyed 200 senior executives across global 2,000 enterprises, conducted deep dive interviews with a cross-section of Blue Prism customers, and compared notes with the executive leadership team at Blue Prism. And of course, we've drawn on a great deal of our own knowledge about the automation market and what our expectations of it are as well, in order to come up with a report that you will find available on our website and also on Blue Prism's. But today, we want to dig into it a little bit and understand a bit more from Terry, and also get the views of Phil on what Terry thought we were trying to do with this in the first place, but also where you see Blue Prism going in the next few years as a result, perhaps, of what you've been learning in this survey.
Sure. Yeah. I guess what we were hoping to get was greater insight. It's always powerful to hear directly from organisations, from end users about how they're using the technology and where they're not and why. So I think understanding how major enterprises were organising their approach to automation, whether things had changed because of the new climate, their level of adoption, some of the successes, some of the challenges, and of course some of the opportunities. All of this is great information and insight to help us as we think about our strategy, how we support clients and how we work with them moving forwards.
And Phil, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, well, you know, I think it's been a big game changer in the industry. You know, we've been observing this space since well, I think we started in 2012, and I know Terry's been around a lot of that time as well in this integration sort of data-driven robotics domain, and things have changed quite dramatically, I think, in the last couple of years in terms of companies playing catch up, companies really trying to figure out more what are their immediate needs, how do you leverage something like automation a little bit more to drive customer experience and revenue and impact, not just back office fulfillment and things like that. So yeah, it's been a dramatic shift in the market, and good to hear a bit more about Terry's views on how things have shifted from his perspective.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think acceleration is probably one of the symptoms or the outcomes of this kind of pandemic environment. Is you know, the change programs that perhaps were in flight or were being considered have suddenly become critical to business survival or business response to a set of unpredictable and rapidly changing circumstances. And I think the way that organisations now approach change programs, for me, has probably changed forever.
Yeah, good. And then I'll share a couple of data points from the study, which I think would be really interesting to share with the audience here on what we're really seeing happening in the industry. So we spoke with 200 leaders of automation decisions across the global 2000 to really get an understanding of, for example, is it taking a higher priority than not? And so you can see here already 90% of those are seeing it as a much higher priority than it was. A few are sort of on the fence, but on the whole, it's much higher. And what we thought we'd do would start to look at what we termed as stragglers, sidekicks, and heroes with how they're approaching automation. And you know, we asked companies basically what is their priority, and if they were using automation for digital transformation, we had them as a hero. Whereas if they were using it merely to optimize legacy systems, we saw them a bit more as a straggler. And so then we started to look at data by the heroes and the stragglers. And you can see here when we said, you know, talk about your company's current mindset. You know, the heroes, those who are using automation in a much more transformative fashion, they're looking to rush ahead to deliver on future plans. So it's nearly 3/4 of them. Whereas with the stragglers, that number was quite a bit lower, and nearly sort of 40% were looking to reset and figure out how to move forward. As you look at the client base you've got and the people you're talking to, Terry, would you say a lot of them are trying to rush ahead to deliver on these future plans, or do you think many are still just in this pause mode, looking around at what's going on and trying to figure out what's the next thing to do?
I mean, I think there's certainly a mix out there, Phil, as you guys uncovered with this report and with this survey. There's a range of approaches from those who haven't even started yet, frankly, to those who are really making automation a bedrock of how they deliver future growth and future business strategies. So I think there's a mix. I think what was enlightening, I guess, is that the customers that are significant users of Blue Prism fall very squarely into this heroes category, which is kind of a good endorsement, I guess, of the power of the technology to deliver way beyond, as it says on this slide here, way beyond just a band-aid, into something that's strategically important.
Interesting. And I think that takes me to the second lesson of the 7 lessons we came out here, which is about really aligning automation with the cloud and data, which is really important for success. Now, you actually founded a company, Thoughtonomy, which was really a cloud-driven automation platform that sort of fitted with Blue Prism, didn't it? It was based on the Blue Prism platform, and then I think they acquired your business a few years ago. So what's your view then on how that's come together, and what is truly cloud ready versus where companies are today?
Yeah, I mean, interesting. I mentioned the accelerant of automation during kind of pandemic times. I think it's done the same to organizations' cloud adoption, or really highlighted the power of a cloud platform in being able to respond much more dynamically, much more rapidly, much more scalably to changes in demand. So, as you say, we built the Thoughtonomy platform using Blue Prism based on a cloud deployment to remove some of the barriers to adoption that might exist if you're in traditional infrastructure deployment programs, but also in order to improve interoperability and the ability to access sources of data from across the landscape of an organization's ecosystem. Because increasingly what we're seeing is the data that businesses run on is not just data that's internal to their organization, it's data that exists in their partner ecosystem, in their supply chain, in their customers, and in the greater, wider world, I guess. So having a very firm strategy to using cloud and being able to access data and interoperate in a dynamic way is really important.
Okay, and then how would you say the conversation shifted, particularly since we've been through this pandemic, a couple of years into this now? I know we talked a lot about the importance of having IT much more bought into the conversation, because there's only a certain amount you can do with any enterprise application without IT's approval and buy-in, right? But we're also seeing, as you can see here, a larger number of the C-suite starting to get much more focused on sponsoring these initiatives and conversations. As you look at a lot of Blue Prism's customers, you've got some fairly heritage businesses which have worked with you for a long time. Would you say those conversations have shifted from fairly functional to more strategic in the recent past?
Yeah, and I think that's a combination of customer adoption and customer, I guess, the importance that customers are placing on intelligent automation, and the impact it's having on business strategies. It becomes something that isn't just a project in a department, whether that's an IT-led project or whether it's a business-led project. It becomes something that's much more important to the foundations of an organization, and therefore needs to be led or sponsored from the C-suite. One of the big findings, I think, from adoption and scaling of automation programs is that without C-suite sponsorship, without it being taken seriously and endorsed as a strategic imperative for the business, then it's much more hard for organizations to get value from their automation initiatives. The minute you place it in the important initiative category and at the foundation of what you're doing as a strategy, then it's suddenly the level of adoption, the level of value increases significantly.
Interesting. And where are you seeing automation being leveraged across the organization? In what areas? You can see here we looked at your big digital platforms, ERP suites, workflow, RPA, even service provider solutions. You know, in terms of, is it generally being pulled into these digital conversations? I know, for example, your company's made a lot of noise around its connectors with AWS, for example, and some of the investments there. But ultimately, where are you seeing most of the investments taking place at the moment?
I mean, I think the important thing is this technology is not a standalone, it's part of an ecosystem. And I think what Blue Prism have done in terms of the approach to being able to integrate with other platforms is really focus on interoperability, the ability to use different systems and different sources of data to deliver an outcome. So some of that is custom configured for a particular implementation, but increasingly having connectors into some of these leading platforms and some of these leading systems through the digital exchange is important to helping organizations accelerate. And so it's really a mix. It's the assets and the platforms that underpin the operation of a business that can be leveraged by automation.
And is there a mindset shift in terms of what's leading the immediate conversation here when we look at, for example, the one office? We see from our client end this ability to link the customer experience, the employee experience together is very, very important, breaking down silos. And you can see here those companies struggling with success with automation have been those struggling with internal silos versus those on the heroes side are a bit more trying to figure out change management and trying to join up areas and that sort of thing across companies. Has the conversation radically changed now to more of getting automation out of these little silos and getting it into a more joined up, broader enterprise conversation? Do you see real progress there, Terry?
I do, and we're not there yet, I don't think, but we're certainly seeing progress. I think this departmental deployment of automation as a tactical productivity enhancement still exists. People are still doing that, but that's what we refer to as wave one automation. That's kind of the easy stuff, the low hanging. Let's get some quick wins because the technology is able to leverage existing systems in a kind of frictionless way through manipulating interfaces and executing process flow. That's kind of the straightforward, easy, simple stuff. And some organisations have kind of stopped there, but it's when you get into the kind of wave two, wave three use cases, which are about how is this underpinning my business performance? What's important to my business? What matters? Is it customer experience? Is it patient care in healthcare? Is it the ability to operate round the clock? Is it the ability to scale up and down to meet unpredictable demand? All of these, each business will have its own KPIs and metrics that really matter to its operation. And if we start to think about automation as a way to unlock some of that performance, then it moves you into out of just the simple productivity stuff into something that's more strategic. And then if you step even beyond that into the kind of third wave, it's really thinking about, now I've got this asset, this digital workforce at my behest. How can I really use that to do things that I couldn't have even dreamed of, or wouldn't have found viable using traditional means? And so we're certainly seeing organisations making that shift, and the guys that you refer to as the heroes increasingly pushing into the boundaries of what they're doing and thinking about it completely differently. And it becomes a completely different mindset, I think, to use the language of your slide here.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And one of the biggest shifts I've seen has been some businesses, particularly during the worst times of the pandemic, were struggling with customer service, impact with just keeping the wheels on the businesses, and that's where automation teams, I think some organizations really stepped up and started to look at automation as something that could really impact customer experience, really keep critical operations moving more fluidly, and I think its use has really kicked on a lot in terms of, hey, sometimes sustaining legacy is good. Sometimes legacy needs to function better, and a lot of these companies are racing into the cloud. They're trying to move very quickly, and they need all the tools they can get to be effective for them. In terms of getting help, this is the 7th lesson from the study, is only 7% of the actual heroes we picked out were really using their internal teams for their automation journeys, compared with 32% of stragglers. There's a big reliance on using the third-party systems integrators, these firms, and to drive a lot of this for them. Is this something that you've seen very consistent at your client end? You're seeing a lot more involvement from integrators and reliance on third parties?
I mean, I guess this was probably something that surprised this outcome in terms of the extent to which some of these organisations are using third parties. There tends to typically be some level of internal capability, a centre of excellence, or a head of automation that is kind of driving and coordinating efforts internally. But you know, clearly there's a skills requirement from outside of an organisation that's being pulled in to help accelerate journeys, and that to some degree that may be about you know, picking up the point earlier about accelerating the adoption curve, the speed of adoption, the velocity of adoption is easier if you've got access to external skills that can come in, that can focus on it, that can not detract from the day-to-day operation of the business, and that can deliver an outcome. So
yeah, it's a fascinating time, and the coming together of I think conversations in areas like BPM and service management, and how those are dovetailing with where's the best use of RPA has been very prominent with a lot of companies we talk to. So as you look out at the next year or two, you know, you've seen this space develop a lot, Terry. What's your crystal ball? What are you seeing in your crystal ball for this space in the next 12 to 24 months?
well, I think, you know, as you've demonstrated with this survey, and as we've known for a while, this is still a very nascent technology in terms of its level of adoption. There's a huge amount of scope and bandwidth, if you like, for organisations to increase what they're doing with the technology, and that's, you know, the technology as it exists today. I think there's a huge scale opportunity that still exists for people to get better value from it, for people to move through these the ways that I kind of referred to. So, you know, we can see some significant scaling up of intelligent automation programs from organisations that have already adopted, and there are still, as I mentioned at the start, there are still those out there that have yet to really get going and yet to really see the power. I think one of the things that's emerging, and, you know, again, it's great to get this insight because it helps to surface the use cases, the adoptions, the things that people are doing with the technology, and that kind of creates this art of the possible type mindset for businesses to think, well, actually, what could I be doing? What should I be doing? How could I be thinking differently? How can I transform? So from adoption point of view, I think that's what we see. Obviously, we see some maturing of capability in the technology, particularly ability to interact with human workforce. So you move into this kind of hybrid digital human execution platform where they're all part of a kind of hybrid operating workforce that underpins a business. You know, humans do the tasks that are most suited to humans, and the digital workers do more. I think more and more interactions will happen with a digital platform at some point in the process, and that has some different requirements on the ability to interact in natural language, the ability to use unstructured sources of data and to extract information. So we're seeing a very rapid maturing of our capability in some of these areas.
Interesting. And what would your advice be then to professionals trying to get more leverage, more career traction in this space? You know, what do you think is the best things that they can do to add more value to their companies in this area?
I mean, there's fantastic career opportunities in this space, as we can see, and as actually demonstrated from your chart about who's helping with automation programming. There's clearly an appetite and a need for capability. You know, one of the things that we're very focused on is democratizing the use of our platform as far as possible, and that means continually looking at the user experience of a Blue Prism user, how they interact with the platform, how they learn how to use it, and how quickly they can drive the adoption within their organization. So we're very, very focused on that, on making the platform as intuitive and easy to use as it could possibly be. And some of the recent product releases have been about, you know, simplifying that interaction, that end-to-end interface, and also thinking about how you automate the process of automation, how you use the technology kind of in and of itself to speed up improve the process to delivering an automated outcome. So I think that's important. And what that how that plays into the skills requirement is it means the individuals have to focus less on learning how to use the technology and more on what they're going to deliver as an outcome and how to interpret a business need, a business requirement, or a business strategy and deliver it using automation technology.
Terry, just thinking about everything you've been speaking about and where you're seeing the automation world heading, what's the kind of end state for automation? You've talked about armies of automated digital folk wandering around inside organizations. What does that actually mean in terms of how you want to make not just the people work with the technology, but the technology work with the technology and beyond?
Yeah, it's a good question, and David, I don't really see an end state. I don't think there's a point at which any organisation can say we're done here with this, with this technology and the value we can get from it, because not only will the technology continue to evolve and improve and enhance, but the things that organisations are able to do with it and rethink and re-strategize will move ahead as well. I think one of the great things, about the way our technology works is its ability to drive interoperability and access to sources of data. And if you think about that, you tend to think about that in the context of a system of an organization's existing systems and platforms. But actually, if you think beyond that, if you think about this as a technology that allows you to access all of the new things that are being released into the technology landscape, all of the new capabilities, all of the new intelligence, AI type, machine learning type capability. And if you can use this technology to open up that access, then effectively you've got a platform that can really become the underpinnings of how you use technology, how you use systems, and how you deliver outcomes for your business.
And Phil, how do you see the future of automation, and in particular picking up on Terry's point there? And we've been talking about one ecosystem as our next step on the HFS journey. How does that all fit together in your head?
Well, I mean, ecosystems are all about collaborating with other organizations with a common goal, common purpose. And I think companies are going through, I think we call it these 3 horizons of change concurrently. One is just becoming digitally proficient. The second one is moving more into the one office, which is more about internal end-to-end alignment between customer and employee processes. And then this third vision is, we call it one ecosystem, we should point out, which is multiple organizations across industries where we have common goals that we have to partner with and collaborate with to manage that customer life cycle and think more externally about how we operate in the world today. And I think that's where some of these automation capabilities become increasingly important. So if you're a CPG company or a retailer, you can't function today if you're not pushing your products through AWS or Alibaba or some of these other sites, for example. So you need to figure out how to connect, how to interact, how to be more effective with these environments. And I think automation has a big part to play, connecting businesses, enabling far more autonomous capabilities to function more effectively. I don't think we can function without it, and I think it's becoming more embedded as an attitude within organizations that if we can't automate in the cloud, we can't automate in our ecosystem, we're not going to function effectively. So I just think it's becoming more and more critical. It's more of an attitude. It's not about, do I have a PhD in algorithmic science? It's, do I understand my business and the data I need to be effective and the processes that have to be designed to get there? So I think we're going through a huge process of change. I think we're only at the start of it, to be honest. I think we're going to look at another 5 years of figuring out how to operate effectively in this environment. But think employee experience, customer experience, and partner experience coming together as one big need in the industry. So
Terry and Phil, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate hearing from both of your perspectives, some really exceptional wisdom that's very helpful for me, and I'm sure very helpful for everyone watching and listening today. So from us today, thanks very much, and we hope you'll be joining us on the next video cast.